Okay, in chapter 14, we're really going to concentrate on the differences between the North and the South. And in today's lesson, we're going to really focus on the North and industry in the North in particular. All right, so some new inventions. One of the first things I need to talk about is Elias Howe. He invented the sewing machine. Okay, I always do that. Sewing machine. All right. Few people probably know who this guy is, but he ended up selling his invention to a guy named Singer. And many people have heard of Singer's sewing machines. Very popular even today, Singer sewing machines. Okay, but the sewing machine is now the next step in the process. If you think about it, when we start first talking about the Industrial Revolution, we've talked about, the spinning jenny and, weaving cloth, all those kind of things. But right now what we have are just big bolts of cloth that are leaving factories. Now women have to take this cloth, cut out a pattern, and then with a needle and thread sew together the clothes. But with the invention of the sewing machine, it makes this process much faster, and now factories are buying lots of sewing machines, and women are being employed to sew clothes. Now, instead of everything being made by hand at home, we're starting to get clothes that are manufactured because of the invention of the sewing machine. We really need to start talking about farm equipment, farm improvements, all right? John Deere. Everybody loves John Deere. I do. I wish I had one. John Deere tractor, super cool green tractor. Okay, but John Deere started with a plow, the steel plow. Up until this time, plows are made of heavy wood or iron. Iron is extremely heavy. Horses can't pull it. They have to have oxen. They're slow. You can't sharpen iron. But steel, you can do several things. First of all, steel is light in relative terms compared to iron. A horse can pull a steel plow. They'll be able to plow more land quicker. The steel plow can cut deeper. The steel plow can be sharpened. And it is able to cut and tame, especially the land out, further west. The steel plow is one of the most important inventions, followed closely by the reaper. The reaper. Okay, Cyrus McCormick invents the reaper. And what it is basically, it's kind of like, have you ever seen one of those old-fashioned lawn mowers where you have to, it's got a couple blades and you push it and you hear this big wheel kind of turning and it's cutting across a bar at the bottom. It's pulling the grass across a cutting bar. Well, that's what a reaper machine is. Up until this time, people would have to go out into the field with a big scythe, which is kind of like what the Grim Reaper carries with him, and cuts down all the wheat or corn or whatever. It's slow, tedious work. But now, with a reaper, and that's always on the front end of a combine. By the way, this is a modern combine right there. And this part right there is the reaper. All right? Now, you have this wheel that's turning. It's got blades that spin and another cutting bar at the bottom, and it's being dragged by horses. And as that bar is coming down, the wheel is turning and cutting all the corn or wheat or whatever crop you have. Okay, so that's the reaper. That greatly improves the time it takes to harvest your crops. So you have the steel plow that's making plowing the fields quicker. You plant the seed, it's going to grow, and now the reaper is going to be able to quickly harvest the crop. All right? Next, one of the most important inventions is the telegraph. Samuel Morse invents the telegraph machine in 1844. I always look at telegraph now as kind of like ancient text messaging because you're going to be paying by the letter or word. You're not going to send a novel via telegraph because you're paying either by the letter or word. So it's going to be short, quick bursts. And what it is going to be a system of dashes and dots. Now, Samuel Morse takes this system of dashes and dots and creates an alphabet with it, where people, most people probably in the United States at that time even, didn't understand the Morse code. They don't need to. What they have is they take a message down to a telegraph office, and they say, hey, I'd like you to send this telegraph. Like, come home, your mother is sick. Okay, it'll be something simple like that. They'll give it to the telegraph operator. Where is it going to? It's going to Dayton, Ohio. He then pounds out this message. Sounds sort of like that. Okay? Now, at the telegraph office in Dayton, there's someone who's listening. who then knows how to interpret Morse code. He writes down the message, and then they send a runner who delivers that message, okay? But they're going to be short, quick little messages. You're certainly not going to send a big long love letter or a big novel, but for the first time, we were able to send signals or messages, at the speed of electricity. So this is amazing invention. Thousands of miles of wire. It helped businesses. It helps communications. It helps stock markets. It helps trains. It does a great job. It's also going to be wonderful when time comes for war. Now commanders are able to send quickly messages to their other commanders. Now, for the first time, or not the first time, but one of the few times, Congress has actually says, hey, this is a pretty cool idea. And they actually fund a telegraph wire to go from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore to see if this is really worth the investment, if this is something that is feasible. And they do. So they run wire from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, Maryland, and they gather around and they send a message to see if it's going to work. So they kind of all gathered together in the Supreme Court. I'm not sure why it's the Supreme Court, not Congress or Senate, but anyways, they did in the Supreme Court. And Morse is there, and he taps out a message, right? And he has trained somebody in Baltimore how to interpret this code. And he types out a message that says, "What hath God wrought?" What means, what hath God brought, okay? And a few seconds later, the same message comes back from Baltimore. "What hath God wrought?" And people are amazed. It's traveled from Washington, D.C. and back to Washington, D.C. in a matter of seconds. And the people are all amazed. All right? So that's the telegraph. Now we need to talk about railroads. Railroads. Now the first railroads were actually just kind of used in mines back in Europe, and it's really simple. All it is a railroad track, all right, that's pulls a cart along a track by horses or mules. They used them in mines to, as the miners are going down there and they're chipping out ore, they load these cars up, and then the mules are able to drag, this car out. Okay, so this is horsepower, pure horsepower. But the steam engine is going to be hugely important. And at first, they use the steam engine to pump out water out of mines. So that's one of the first inventions is to use a steam engine to pump out water because, underground, a lot of times water will seep in. So now that they can use the steam pump to pump out water. Well, the next logical invention is going to be, hey, why don't we basically concoct something instead of having horses and mules pull this? We'll have a steam-powered car. So steam-powered, again, and if you think about it, steam power is the same stuff that happens in nuclear reactors. It's just heat and water. And what steam engines do, we've talked about this before, I know, is that you just take a big kettle, fill it full of water, and you add heat. And as that water begins to boil, steam is produced. The steam is then channeled or funneled into little tubes, and the pressure is able to push pistons back and forth. And then these pistons are connected to connecting rods and to wheels that they turn. All right? So the steam-powered locomotive arrives on scene. Okay, so the first steam-powered locomotive is called the Rocket. Doggone it. The Rocket. Woo, baby! It goes a-blazing 30 miles per hour, which, honestly, if you think about it, is way fast. Remember, if the fastest you've ever gone is as fast as a horse can run, this is amazing. Okay, this is, just blazing speed. Oh my gosh, 30 miles per hour. All right? So, again, the railroads are going to boom. This is an invention, much like the telegraph, that people wake up to and they go, this is an invention. It's amazing to them, okay? And they see lots of potential. But just like the steamship has lots of problems, not always safe, all right? Again, if they don't monitor the steam engine really closely, it's going to blow up. It's certainly not always reliable. They break. Often soft roadbeds. And if you think about this, if you look right here, okay, that's the roadbed, all right? So the guys will pile up gravel and stone to set the rails on, all right? But what if a bunch of water comes and washes all this gravel and dirt and everything is there? Now what you have is these steel beams being supported by nothing. Nothing. Okay, it's all been washed out from underneath it. As the train comes down the track, that weight of that locomotive hits that, nothing to support that steel, it bends, and the train derails, goes off the track. So soft road beds are a problem. Okay, weak bridges are also a problem. I've seen pictures, they look like tinker toys, going over canyons. You're like, oh my gosh. Wood, rickety, they often will break, crumble. But the other thing you got to think about is these steam engines are being heated by coal or wood, and smoke and embers are coming out of the smokestack, and they might be falling on these wooden bridges, and they might burn down. Of course, your train's already over it. You don't even know it. Boom, catches on fire, burns down. Well, the next train coming down the track, they come around the corner, no bridge, right into a canyon, boom. Or maybe you're coming back, and now the bridge isn't there. Okay? They break down a lot, and of course, fires. And just like I said, fires. They also start fires not just on the railroad tracks. They start fires in towns and along the tracks. These embers are blowing out all over the place. So, they cause a lot of fires. And then, of course, usually one track. So lots of collisions. They have to be very, very cautious of how they schedule these trains. All right? So if they send one train one direction, remember there's only one track, all right? You got to pray that the other guy hasn't sent a train the other direction, back towards you. It's going to be a head-on collision. By the way, by the time you saw that guy coming, it's going to be next to impossible to stop a train at full speed. Okay, so having one track, you have to have a very good system. You got to make sure the people are on time. As a matter of fact, this kind of brings me to something that I should tell you. Up until this time, there was no standard time. What I mean by that is that towns set their own time. Chicago, it might say it's 12 o'clock. In Peoria, it might be 12:15. In, I don't know, Cleveland, it might be 12:45. So these towns are kind of just setting the clock based on what time they think it is. But as trains begin to grow, and you got to make sure the trains are on schedule so that you don't, have collisions, you're going to see a push for a central standardized time. All right? And that's because of the railroads. All right, check out this. 1840. These are miles of tracks right here, miles of tracks. Okay, and this is the number of miles. Okay, so 1840, we had what? 3,500 maybe miles of tracks. 1845, 45, 4,600. But by 1860, over 31,000 miles of track. Just look at the amount the railroads grow in just 20 years. This is amazing. Okay, railroads are a huge success, but they're happening mostly in the north. Check out this slide. Okay, so here's the railroads in 1850. All right, you'll notice that up in New England, lots and lots of railroad tracks. And why is that? Because that's where all the manufacturing plants are. That's where all the factories are. Okay. You see a few down in the south, but not many. Mostly in Atlanta, Chattanooga, okay, kind of hooking up the coast to Charleston, Savannah, and a little bit up in Virginia. But Memphis, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, very, very few. Most of the tracks are going to be in the north supporting the factory system. Not that many railroad lines in the south. Keep that in mind. Okay, the next invention that we need to talk about are the clipper ships. Clipper ships were an American invention in the 1840s, 1850s. They are very tall mass. Comparison to the size of the ship, very tall mass. When you have a tall mass, you can have a huge sail, which means you're going to be able to move very, very fast. The faster you can sail, the faster you can get your goods across to sell them, right? So if I can get across the Atlantic in, 3 weeks instead of 6 weeks, I'm going to double my money. Now, obviously, railroads can get things from the factories to the coast, but what they need now are fast ships. And the Clipper ship, this sail ship, is what's going to help. And they're going to be able to get those goods from America to other countries much quicker. Okay, so these American Clipper ships, they are the fastest ships on the sea, faster than Great Britain's. In fact, they're able to sail all the way to China in 81 days. 81 days, oh my gosh. Okay, it takes normal ships like 5 months to get there. So that should tell you how quick these ships are. But they are kind of too late in the game, right? Is the day of the sailing ship, is that kind of in the past? Yes, it is. Because the steam engine is going to take the place of sails. Just like it is replacing, ships and railroads, this steam engine is going to basically make these Clipper ships obsolete. So now we have this invention, steam power. Factories began to use steam instead of water power. Remember the water wheel? Well, that's old-fashioned. Now they're using steam power. Now you see factories begin to spring up. Before you had to be next to a kind of a fast-moving river. You don't need that anymore. As long as you can get water, and you can do that from a canal or wherever, all right, a lake even, you can start seeing factories begin to shift over to steam power. Much more efficient, much more profitable. Okay, with these steam-powered, manufacturing plants, they can make more machines and they can make more manufactured goods at lower cost. All right. So now Americans, instead of having to make everything at home, they're able to start buying factory-made goods at a lower cost. All right. Railroad transportation. All right. With the huge success of railroads, we can now take these manufactured goods and transport them cheaply and quickly, just kind of like what steamboats had done. Now, railroads are not limited to where rivers are. Railroads can go anywhere you can lay track. And with that, towns begin to grow along the railroads. Okay? If you go along Interstate 80 in Nebraska, a lot of those towns were just little dinky towns. And there used to be little dinky towns all over Nebraska. But when the railroad came and decided where the tracks are going to go, it really meant it made the difference between if your town was going to live or if it was going to die. Honestly, these towns that missed railroads by 10 or 15 miles, they disappeared. Towns along the railroad tracks are going to flourish. If you look at Grand Island, you look at North Platte, you look at Kearney, they have the railroad that go through there. Look at Omaha itself. Oh my gosh. At one point, Omaha was not the biggest city in Nebraska. Certainly not. In fact, Bellevue was bigger than Omaha at one point. Nebraska City was also kind of, looking at maybe it's going to be the major city in Nebraska. But when the Union Pacific Railroad decides to make Omaha the headquarters, and that's where the railroad track is going to leave from, these other cities begin to peter out. All right? If you've been down to Nebraska City, it's pretty old, right? Not a lot of economic growth. Look at the changes between Omaha and Nebraska City. Both of them at the time were competing for prestige and power. Look how much Omaha's grown, and that has a lot to do with railroads. All right? Well, there you have it. We've looked at manufacturing in the North. We've looked at new inventions, the sewing machine, the steel plow, the reaper, the telegraph, the advent of the railroad, the steam-powered railroad, the Clipper ships. Okay? So you see a lot of this stuff happening, and it's happening primarily in the North. All right. See you later.